Chapter 54. I. Ina didn't care what the gods said. She would not be a medical assistant or any other kind of assistant to Jessica. She was the first mate, which meant she was in charge. Although, the first aid skill had been a pleasant surprise. If I get good enough at healing, we can get rid of Jessica once and for all, she thought. She eyed the woman's dark hair as it fluttered around wildly in the intense gusts that buffeted the raft. She pulled the cords on her hoodie tight, tied them into a knot, and sighed. Maybe once she's gone, I'll try out black hair, she thought. It had required too much energy for her to simulate human hair in these winds, so she had resigned herself to the hoodie, which wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't soaked through and sticking to her. Everyone on the raft was soaked from the sea spray. Most gripped one of the four legs that stuck out from Ob's old table that was the core of the raft. The wind and waves had increased over the course of the day. The waves were now reaching 10 feet in height, and the raft would pitch up steeply as it climbed one, peaked, and then downward into the trench between the waves. A blast of warm ocean water was sent backwards as the front of the raft rammed into the base of the next wave. She closed her eyes as it hit her face, tasting salt on her wet lips. She eyed the bamboo and vines that seemed to barely hold together, groaning with each bending stress as the raft climbed up and down the waves. And she wasn't the only one. Captain, I believe as the only learned man here, it is my duty to speak up and say if we don't take the sail in, we are going to lose it. Brennan had to raise his voice to be heard over the wind. He was hunched over his makeshift plant box that he had relocated to the table core of the raft. It was now completely wrapped by the spare vines, but he still hugged it with his body. The balsa wood that made up the main mast had started to bend forwards, while Jacob and Manu had to work together to secure the freestanding end to keep the sail open. I know. But we need to keep it up as long as possible. If we don't make it to the next island soon, the current will reverse and we won't make it. Ina was still a little irritated that Jacob had allowed Jessica to interview. As she eyed the precariously bending mast, she thought he probably deserved to be humbled a bit. At least she had been able to claim the stylus and tablet, since Jessica had not officially been on the crew when they were obtained, though she didn't really know what to do with them. A blast of wind caused her to secure her hood, and the raft was shoved forward as the flag sail bulged outwards. As the gust sustained, the mast started to bend further. Snap! Fibers of wood started to splinter off the back of the mast. It sounded like popsicle sticks bent in half, a crinkling woody sound. Everyone heard it. Oh shit! Jacob started to stand up. Manu, take it in, now! Both men struggled against the wind to bring the freestanding end of the sail next to the main mast and coiling it, effectively closing off the sail. They both grabbed a vine to wrap around and tie it off, securing it from the blowing wind. The mast was now permanently bent at an odd angle from the splintered point. The fragmented wood went about halfway through, but seemed sturdy enough without the pressure from the sail. The wind whistled through the small gaps in the fibers. Ina was calmer than the others. Though she knew this tidal storm would get much stronger before they would reach the island, she didn't know exactly why, but as the waters from the shelf emptied out into the deeper ocean each cycle, vast raging typhoons would form. She was calm because she could survive without the raft. It might actually be fun to be in the water right now, she thought. She mentally calculated the odds of survival if the raft capsized. Cripple, dead. Jessica, dead. Brennan, dead. Manu, maybe. Lou, maybe. Jacob, she would have to keep an eye on him. She waited until the raft had started its next climb and then shuffled closer to Jacob, grabbing the table leg near him just before everything pitched down again. As night fell, a dark shroud of thick clouds prevented any moonlight from penetrating. A torrent of rain had started to downpour. The crew was wet, tired, and miserable. The raft had become an erratic wooden roller coaster that alternated between precarious climbs and crashing descents. They clutched against it like the thread of life, like it was the thread of life, because it was. The whistling of the wind through the splintered section of the mast had become an almost constant whine. Like a kettle that had just started to boil. The harder the wind gusted, the more high-pitched it became. A bright flash of dancing lightning tendrils lit up the sky, followed by a deep echoing boom. It briefly illuminated the raft. Jessica had propped Matt up against the mast and had both hands around it with him in the space between her arms. Lou and Manu both grabbed the same leg across from Ina and Jacob. Brennan was on the opposite side of the mast, laying on top of his plants, gripping it with both hands. As the raft crested a wave, a glimpse of an orb of light appeared on the horizon, disappearing from view as the raft entered another trench. Maybe it was just the lightning, Ina thought. She stared in the direction it had been, and as the raft crested another wave, she saw it. Light Eater, drown it! Jacob! She leaned forward against his wet body. The Light Eater has found us! She reached an arm in front of his face and pointed. As the raft rose again, it came into view. Closer. I see it. How can it find us in the storm? I thought you said it was attracted to noise. There's no way it can. Jacob turned to look at the mast. The mast, Ina! It has to be! Shit! He released his grip on the leg and turned to get up, staggering off balance as the raft shifted. Ina reached out and stabilized him. Lightning flashed, and he used the momentary vision to cross to the mast, bending over to retrieve his sword from underneath. There's a monster out there! It's attracted to noise! Nobody speak! Get down! Jacob shouted as lightning struck, illuminating them, and he swung at the splintered part of the raft, right over Brennan's head. The part of the mast Brennan and Jessica were holding onto was below the problem area. Without his hands actively bracing him, he lurched, grabbing the mast with one to steady himself. Ina watched Jacob taking swings with each lightning strike as the spotlight continued to move closer. It was almost on them when Jacob finally had a strike that reached the gap in the wood, causing the whistle, opening it up and ceasing the noise. Then they crested another wave, and the light was next to them. An orb of light floating above the water behind them. Could it still find us? Ina thought. The raft hit the downward slope while the light crested behind them. As they crashed into the bottom of the slope, lightning flashed, revealing the gargantuan body of the creature behind them, suspended in the wave. It was as if someone had stuck the mouth of a piranha on a whale. If the mouth had an unhinged lower jaw that protruded far past the upper end and opened wide enough that you could drive a bus through it. There was barely enough room above for a large bulbous mound of rubbery skin. This had started to open, and a dark green glowing iris swept over them. Oh shit! It sees us! Jacob shouted over the storm as his pulse quickened and his stomach dropped out. He felt the heavy wet metal of the tide sword against his curled fingers. What can it do against that thing, he thought. Then Jacob felt the fear of his crew. They were all white-knuckled, holding on with all their might, slack-jawed, frozen. It wasn't fair. They had come so far, so close. Had one of these devoured Anna when she landed in the abyssal sea? Anna, he thought. The guilt in his heart numbed the fear in his stomach. The Light Eater launched itself out of the wave. Lightning crashed. The cavern with teeth was going to swallow them whole. The raft shifted upwards, powered by the rising slope of the next giant wave. One of the upper teeth scraped the top of the mast, ripping it violently backwards. The bamboo bundles on the back of the raft shattered as giant sharp stalagmites burst through the bottom. The maw snapped closed, and the monster's momentum carried it downward below the surface. Time seemed to slow as the raft was carried upward by the rising waters of the waveform. The mast fell backward, the already weakened base snapping and splintering as it crashed toward the deck. The wind caused it to swing along the last threads of wood remaining, right toward Jessica. In the dark, Jacob couldn't see. Jessica screamed, and he thought he heard a splash, a flash of lightning. Matt had been shoved out of the way, but Jessica was gone. The storm intensified, wind blasting, lightning bursting like a strobe light. Vision was gained in periods of frames of light. No one was moving. The guilt in his heart had started to burn. He remembered his oath. The dream of a father that wasn't a disappointment. His grip tightened around the hilt. He felt it get warmer. The sword started to emanate a blue glow. Ina! Jessica fell in! Go! He saw a frame of her, hoodie off, tentacles flowing in the wind, diving into the water. He locked his worry about them in a corner of his mind. There wasn't time. Brennan! I need the longest vines tied around me! Now! Captain, why? Just do it! It's coming back! He felt vines pressed into his hands. He couldn't find the end. It was a jumbled mess getting blown by the gale force winds. They were wet and slipping. He found an end. Yes, the raft crested the wave, and the raft shook violently as it started to pitch down again. The vines slipped from his hand. Fuck! Captain, allow me. Lou spoke near his ear, calmly. A frame of vision showed Lou standing with one knee bent deep to balance on the steeply slanted deck as he manipulated the vine around his waist. Jacob felt the vine tighten as the orb of light erupted from the water at the crest of the wave behind them. A dark green eye swept over them from above. Tie the other end to the raft! This time, the Light Eater didn't jump out of the wave towards them as they hit the bottom of the waveform. It sped up. Its traversal quickly descending to the trench itself and then rising from behind them. Jacob held the remains of the mast, vibrating with the immense water pressure spurring the raft upwards, and focused on the approaching creature, on its eye. If it can't see us, it can't track us in this storm, he thought. Get ready to pull me up! Bro, you're crazy! It's tied. The monster was so close, a frame of vision showed the dark shadow of the lower maw starting to extend below the raft. He felt gravity wanting to pull him down toward it as the raft jetted upwards. He released. His feet impacted the deck 3 times as he gathered momentum, then leapt off the raft. 2 hands extending the sword, aiming for the huge green orb. eyes squinting against the salty, wet whips of wind, the scent of sulfur hitting his nose. If only she could see me now, he thought. The eye's lid closed as the point struck. The tough rubber hide resisted the sword's fine edge. He felt his momentum and weight transfer through the sword to the edge, and then it ripped through like a butter knife through a steak. It sank to the hilt. Then he was underwater as the monster dove. Jacob was pulled with the beast as the sword was stuck. He fought to get his feet against the monster and pushed off, but the sword was stuck fast. He felt a tug at his waist, and his legs were ripped backwards as the vine went taut. The strength in his arms fought